Good morning, 6pm, Mrs. Duggan. Today, my report is on New Zealand. New Zealand's colourful history started from the time when the Rangitata landmass separated from the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana 80 million years ago, evolving over time to become Gondwanaland, then modern New Zealand. First inhabitants. New Zealand's first inhabitants were Polynesians from other South Pacific islands. They arrived around 800 AD. People are still discussing whether the Moriori, moa hunters, or the Maori arrived first. The Moriori and the Maori belong to the same Polynesian race. They arrived in New Zealand and called it Aotearoa, meaning land of the long white cloud. By the 12th century, settlements were scattered over most of the country. What Polynesians found was a land much different to the South Pacific tropical isles of Polynesia. Instead, they found a land of mountains with a more seasonal climate. There were no large mammals to hunt for food, but there was a large flightless bird called the moa. The moa stood up to 15 feet tall, and the Maori found it easy prey. By 1642, when Abel van Tasman sailed up the west coast of the place he named New Zealand, after the province of Zeeland in the Netherlands, the moa had been hunted to extinction. The first encounter between Maori and the European was violent, leading to bloodshed. After partly charting the coastline, Tasman left New Zealand without ever having the chance to set foot ashore. It was Captain James Cook who sailed around New Zealand on the first of his 3 voyages in 1769 that had the honour of being the first European to set foot ashore. Jean-Francis Marie de Seville, commander of a French trading ship, arrived by coincidence in New Zealand waters at the same time. Neither ship saw the other. Captain Cook gave names to a number of New Zealand places, such as New Plymouth and Cook Strait, which are still in use. From the late 1790s on, whalers, traders and missionaries arrived and established settlements mainly along the far northern coast of New Zealand. There had always been wars and conflicts between Maori tribes before European settlers arrived. Weapons used until then were spears or clubs. The arrival of traders led to a flourishing musket trade with the local Maori, who saw the advantages of overcoming enemy tribes with this deadly new weapon. The devastating period, which came to be known as the Intertribal Musket Wars, started. The first permanent settlers didn't arrive until the 1830s. At that time, New Zealand was a lawless trading centre where whalers, seafarers, merchants mixed with adventurers, deserters and escaped convicts from Australia. From 1833, there were attempts to impose British law, and the Maori were forced to sell large amounts of land for nearly nothing, but soon they realised the true worth of what they had given away. The Maori were angry and attacked the British again and again. Rumours of French plans to colonise the South Island helped hurry the British to take action to become friends with the Maori and then colonise New Zealand. A number of Maori chiefs agreed to sign a treaty with the British on the 6th of February 1840, to be known as the Treaty of Waitangi, giving ownership of New Zealand to Britain. There were 2 versions of the treaty, one in English, one in Maori. In the Maori version, it's that the Maori owned the land and that the British were allowed to live there. In the English version, it said that the British owned the land and that the Maori were allowed to stay in peace. After the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, Governor William Hobson purchased land at Okaioto, located in the north of the North Island, and established the country's first capital, which he called Russell, after the then leader of the British House of Commons. The capital city was changed to Auckland in 1841, then in 1865 to the central location in Wellington. When the capital was moved to Auckland in 1841, the settlement at Okaioto burned to the ground. The arrival of lots of European settlers led to a troubled period known as the New Zealand Wars and also the Land Wars, which lasted for over 20 years. Behind the township of Russell was Mikey Hill, topped by a flagstaff, which had been donated by tribe leader Hone Heke after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. He became increasingly unhappy with the way the British authorities were being disrespectful to the Maori chiefs. He saw the British flag as a symbol of this process, so he cut down the flagstaff 4 times between 1844 and 1845 in a protest against the British government. The flagpole was eventually re-erected by Mahihi Ponakawiti and 400 of his men in 1858. The Maori, although outnumbered by the British, proved to be an undefeatable enemy, using some of the first examples of guerrilla warfare tactics and use of trenches as a defence. By 1870, the British government withdrew the last of its soldiers from New Zealand, not wishing to spend any more money on a costly overseas war, which was likely to continue indefinitely. Arguments over land and rights are still happening today, because which of the two is the correct version of the treaty has never been agreed on. New Zealand today is an independent nation within the British Commonwealth. The Queen is represented in New Zealand by the Governor-General. The Prime Minister is John Key, who runs the country from the Beehive, which is the nickname for Parliament House. In Parliament there are 120 seats. 67 members of Parliament are elected, and the other 53 are called list members, who are nominated by their political party. In 1893, New Zealand led the world by becoming the first country to let women vote. When changes were brought in after suffragettes, women's rights protesters, protested across the country. The youngest person ever elected to a city council was Miss Vicky Buck, who won a seat on the Christchurch City Council in a by-election in May 1975 at the age of 19. Vicky then went on to become Mayor of Christchurch. New Zealand is in the southern hemisphere, 1,600 kilometres southeast of Australia, starting at about 170 degrees east of Greenwich, England, and 35 degrees south of the equator, finishing at about 168 degrees east and 47 degrees south. Wellington is the most southerly capital on the planet. New Zealand is made up of 2 main islands, measuring 450 kilometres wide and 1,500 kilometres long, with an area of 268,000 square kilometres. North Island, 115,000 square kilometres, and the South Island, 151 square kilometres. And there are a number of small islands. Some interesting facts about New Zealand. Highest point, Mount Cook, 3,754 metres. New Zealand and Australasia's highest mountain is Akaroi, Mount Cook, The mountain formerly appeared on maps as Mount Cook, but in 1998 the mountain was officially named Oroki Cloudpiercer to incorporate its Maori name. Deepest lake, Lake Hokuru, 462 metres deep. Largest lake, Lake Taupo, extending to 616 square kilometres, and it was formed in the crater left behind after a supervolcano which erupted 26,500 years ago. Longest river, Waikato River, 425 kilometres long. Largest glacier, Tasman Glacier, 29 kilometres long. Deepest cave, Nettlebed, Mount Arthur, 889 metres deep. Length of coastline, 15,811 kilometres long. The French Pass, which separates d'Urville Island from the South Island coast. It is the only place in the world where two different levels of ocean can be seen at once. This causes tremendously dangerous currents. Sometimes the tide flows up to 8 knots through the narrow pass. Fiordland National Park is one of the largest national parks in the world at 1,228,348 hectares. It is also one of the wildest and least populated. Fossil-bearing rocks in the Cobb Valley near Nelson have troglodytes that are 550 million years old. The steepest street in the world is Baldwin Street, Dunedin. Its maximum gradient is 1 in 1.266. The city of Dunedin is also home to New Zealand's oldest university, first newspaper, and first botanic gardens. More fresh water gushes up from the cracks in limestone at Wakarupu, near Nelson, than from any freshwater spring anywhere in the world. Over 2,001 million litres of water gushes up every 24 hours. Today, New Zealand is a relatively peaceful country, and the people are friendly and outgoing. 1/4 of New Zealand is protected wilderness, and much of the country is pollution-free. New Zealand is a country that is not overpopulated and is a backpacker's heaven, because you can get out and explore the beautiful nature by bushwalking, cycling, surfing, sailing, and many other ways, all very cheap. Another hit in New Zealand is the Maori culture. The best place to find Maori culture is Rotorua, along with thermal activity. Another reason backpackers love New Zealand is because it's a place where you can get dirty and relax.